A Buffy the Vampire Slayer reboot seems to be very close to becoming a reality, and I must admit, I'm rather dreading it. So, spoiler warning for something that's over 20 years old, I guess. Buffy is an important television show to many people. I would know. I am one of them. I started watching in the third season, and it became part of my weekly routine until the end of Angel in 2004. The finale for Buffy was powerful and beautiful. Willow truly embracing her power after spending a season fearful of her own strength. Buffy understanding that she needs to share her gifts after spending years learning about the origin of Slayers, to realize that the only reason the world has a singular Slayer at any given time is
because a bunch of men who died thousands of years ago made up that rule.
And by helping all the girls
who might be a Slayer, will be a Slayer.
Buffy and the Scoobies are able to win the war in Sunnydale that they had fought for 7 long years. And over those years, our heroes suffered heartbreaking casualties.
Hey, I died twice.
They earned this victory and the promised respite that it offered. But in the end, Buffy let out a smile, knowing that her future is unwritten.
I'm cookie dough.
And that she will have the help of an unknown number of Slayers. That she will be able to become a real person.
Just gotta live like a person.
And not just a tool in the war against evil. The ending is somewhat ambiguous. Giles suggests they move on to the next fight in Cleveland, a callback to the Season 3 episode Wish.
The hellmouth is officially closed for business.
There's another one in Cleveland.
Yes, I'm aware that there's a great deal of demonic activity in Cleveland.
But there is hope that the unknown that lay ahead of them will be positive. In the final season of Angel, we do get a hint of what Buffy has been doing, as she and the team work to find Slayers and help guide them. Beyond this, we are left to question everything. More than 20 years later, we are apparently staring down the barrel of a reboot that appears to continue the story of this legendary series. First, it feels unnecessary. I understand why the owners of Buffy would want to bring it back in some form. Following the 20th Century Fox acquisition, Disney now owns Buffy, and they are always looking for material to fill their streaming services, and this show is planned for release on Hulu. And frankly, the Buffy fandom is insatiable.
Did you think early on it was going to be such a success?
You know, I was a Star Trek fan, and so I suspected that we may be making a world that would be fun to come back to even after you've seen it a few times. And I used to tell the cast, like, we'd be filming at 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd say, you know, we may be talking about this scene for the rest of our lives. Would anyone like coffee?
The stories of Buffy and Angel and all the rest were continued in comic form. The demand for more stories from the Buffyverse has led to the release of dozens of novels, which are being released to this very day. In October 2023, several cast members reunited to create an audio play called Slayers for Audible. The fans want more Buffy, but I have my concerns. I felt it important to revisit the ending of the series in order to understand where a sequel series would have to jump off from. Presumably, this is a world in which there are innumerable Slayers, even if they are still rare in the grand scheme of things. But the premise of the series was that a single Slayer has been able to hold back evil for millennia. If Buffy were able to lead a team and deploy them globally to wherever was necessary, it is hard to imagine a world where a series that focuses on a young Slayer, much like the original series, would make sense. Even in a scenario where the forces of evil banded together and bolstered their numbers to combat the threat of all these Slayers, ultimately winning against the Slayers until only a few remained, this would still be a world where potential Slayers would constantly be activated. The only alternative would be magic. Perhaps when pushed to the brink of extinction, the dark forces find a way to undo Willow's spell, returning the line of Slayers to
the Chosen One. She alone will stand against the vampires, the demons, and the forces of darkness.
For this to happen would require one prerequisite. Willow would have to be dead. Finally, we could just do the whole parallel universe thing, however uninspiring that sounds. It has been done for several of the official Buffy properties, though it really comes off as little more than elevated fan fiction. Don't get me wrong, it can still be very enjoyable and satisfy the desire for a Buffyverse story, but it doesn't have the impact of a canon story. The idea of continuing Buffy's adventures in a new series is exciting, but when I consider where we've been and what would be required to establish a world for the series to exist in, I become concerned. Yes, Sarah Michelle Gellar coming on board and giving the project her endorsement does lend it a lot of credibility, but there are still too many questions. What will the tone of the series be? Will they try to balance humor and drama in the same way the original series so deftly did? We know that Joss Whedon will not be involved in the show, but realistically he can't be, and not for the reasons you may be thinking.
If Joss is helming it, hell yeah. If he's not, hell no.
There are only two options when it comes to using Joss in a reboot. You either have him run the show, or you don't use him at all. Joss continued the stories of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel in a series of comics that were presented as new seasons of the show. It would be hard to believe that he could come on to a reboot and not have ideas for its direction simply based on previously creating the post-finale world. And while I haven't read all of the comics, I do know that the world grew rather insane, no longer bound by the limitations of a network television series. As for tone, I think it would be a mistake for any reboot to try and imitate the voice of the original series. That was Joss. Any new series will need to find its own voice if it has any chance of standing on its own 2 feet. It will be compared to the original, but the more it can separate itself from it, the better chance it has to succeed and create its own legacy. If all they are going to do is rehash the original series, then they shouldn't even bother. And it must be stated that when the original series came out, that Whedon's style of humor was fresh, but after his involvement with the Avengers, the entire MCU has had that quippy delivery that often undercuts serious scenes. Fans have grown tired of it within the MCU, and what was once fresh and niche has become a bit stale on the palates of audiences. Another pitfall that I can imagine for this new series pertains to audience desires. I can see a situation where after the first or second episode, those fans of the original series who have tuned in simply don't care much for the new Slayer and just want to know what happened to Buffy. Fans who haven't had a new Buffyverse show since Angel ended in 2004 will want to be updated on the entire gang. They'll want to know what happened to all of their favorite characters. What became of the world following Willow's spell? How did the first evil respond to defeat? There are so many questions that fans will want answered. The writers may have a difficult time getting anyone to pay attention to another young girl dealing with high school issues analogized with the evil that surrounds her. Even technology could be an issue. Whedon was extremely hesitant to give his characters cell phones even as they were becoming commonplace in our world. He felt that instant communication would make things too simple for the characters. He would relent in Season 7 when Buffy gives Dawn a phone.
I got a present. What is it?
And this was still well before smartphones and being able to access almost anything from almost anywhere. Finally, I believe that there are so many more interesting directions that could have been taken with a Buffy spin-off. There was an attempt at a Giles prequel project for the BBC, exploring his misspent youth as a Ripper, fleshing out a past that was only hinted at in the show.
Hello, Ripper.
But between Whedon and Anthony Stewart Head's schedules, it never came to fruition. I would love to see a period piece that follows the Slayer in perhaps a different part of the world or country. It would be an interesting twist on what we already know. In the earliest days of the series, the WB aired short vignettes concerning the rumored histories of various Slayers.
23 New Yorkers lost their lives in the 1912 Brooklyn boarding house murders. The killings ended abruptly when a student nurse named Arabella Gish sought lodgings in room number 6.
It would be quite something to see something like this turned into a series. Think Little House on the Prairie with vampires, or something of that ilk. But until the series is released, or more information emerges, we won't know much. Sadly, I'm not looking forward to it. I do have more to say about Buffy, so if you're interested, please subscribe. And if you would like to share your thoughts, please leave a comment. Thank you.
Grr, arg.